Hello, everybody. Welcome into another YouTube live show. I am John Kurtz. Today, you know what we're going to be doing. We are breaking down all of the comments from Pac-12 Media Day. George Kliavkoff had his press conference. Not only that, but gave some comments off to the side as well that we need to analyze that I think raised a few eyebrows. And honestly, this whole thing was fairly predictable to me. We got, I would say, virtually no clarity on either side here. I think, as per usual, if you are a Big 12 fan who is very hopeful about Colorado joining the conference and the Pac-12's ultimate demise, you can take plenty from this, namely one major flub from George Kliavkoff during his press conference, and use it as ammo to fuel your side of the argument. And I think if you are a Pac-12 fan and somebody that is in the Pac-12 media ecosphere, there is plenty that you can take from it as well and say, see, everything's great, everything's honky-dory. But in the end, we got very little clarity on what's actually going on with the TV deal. We got another loose timestamp, but no actual real details on when this thing is going to be done. And just a whole lot of hemming and hawing on both sides of this from everybody reacting to it. So mix in that George Kliavkoff did have one bad moment where he got really called out by a very good line of questioning that came after him with a statement that he threw out there, like kind of put his foot in his mouth once. I would say all of that would have checked boxes that I would have predicted about this whole thing, that we weren't actually going to get much in the way of tangible info here. I guess the one thing that may have changed my thought on it going in a little bit was the comments from DeStefano at Colorado, the chancellor of Colorado, the day before. But it seems like now that was probably to put a little bit of public pressure on George Kliavkoff to deliver some actual numbers, which by all accounts did not happen. We've had some other reporting that suggests Fox may be back at the table for the Pac-12. We'll get to that from Brandon Marcello, one of the national college football guys who was there. We have reporting that suggests two schools, which you only need three to oppose expansion. Two schools do fully oppose expansion right now in the Pac-12, which could be definitely bad news for San Diego State and SMU. I think that the tenor of that has really changed, which is a pretty fascinating development here recently as far as the Pac-12 situation goes. So there are little bits to break down. And to accentuate just how on brand this was, that you could have both sides kind of looking at this two different ways, I'm going to read you today snippets from two different articles. One that was written by Ross Dellinger of formerly Sports Illustrated, now Yahoo Sports, and then the other one written by Stuart Mandel from The Athletic. And you get two very different tones of how all this went down. Dellinger, much more skeptical about the situation that the Pac-12 is in. Stuart Mandel, more friendly to the situation that the Pac-12 finds itself in. So that's it. That's the scenario of what we have here. It's a lot to digest and a lot to take in, but ultimately I'm not sure that it leaves us in much different of a spot than where we have been already. Paul Feinbaum was out here taking shots at Iowa State once again, and I guess by return or by proxy through that, the Big 12 as well, although it wasn't horrendous. So if we have time, we can get to Paul Feinbaum's comments as well. Just double check my outline here, make sure that I don't have anything else for you. Well, we got some John Wilner, a little bit of John Wilner reaction, moving of the goalpost once again. If you're wondering what his updated Pac-12 survival odds are going to be, he's had that line set for a while. It's been at 4 points. Survival is a 4-point favorite over extinction for the Pac-12 conference. We've got somewhat of an update on that from John Wilner as well to get to you here today. So that's in general what I have coming at you with the show here tonight. Looking forward to all of it. And those of you who have not been here before, even if you have, I'll give you a reminder on how this is going to go down, how this works. I've got those topics. I will give you my takes. But if you want to be a part of the show tonight, you are more than welcome. There are 100 people in the chat already almost. I will not have time to make it through every single thing that's happening in the chat here today. But if you want to be a part of it, if you want to guarantee your chat makes it into the conversation tonight, makes it into the video and into the show, you can click the $ below the chat box where it says chat and attach a donation to your question or comment. So not only will your voice be heard, you can help control the content on the show tonight, but also you support the work that I'm doing to bring you Big 12 content on a week in, week out basis. Much appreciate all of you guys who do that. Could not do it without all of your support. So again, if you want to be a part of the show tonight, like our web, and we'll get to our web's comment here in just a minute. But if you want to be a part of it, click the $ below the chat box where it says chat, and that is how you can do that. There's a totally free way that you can support the channel as well. And all that takes is just one click. I just need you to click the like button on the video. Completely free way to support the channel. Another thing I would immensely appreciate. And hey, leave a comment in the comment section before, during, or after. Whether you love me, hate me, agree, disagree, all of that really helps. Helps with that YouTube algorithm, gets the video further, and more people can see this. We can grow this channel and this community even more. So I'd appreciate all of you who do that. You can contribute to the channel on Venmo as well. If you are not with us live, you are watching this later on. John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo if you'd like to support the channel that way as well. So that is another way that you can do that. Our web, I feel like this comment is very on point in this instance. Layups and dominoes, bro. LOL. That statement, you could just as much be the way that you're doing it, levying it as kind of a sarcastic tongue-in-cheek comment at the Pac-12. Of course, they have long referenced that it was going to be a layup to beat the Big 12's number, or at least come close to the Big 12's TV number. They've been very confident for a long time, and most of the anonymous quotes that you're getting from inside the Pac-12 right now are still very confident. So it could be tongue-in-cheek here from our web saying, look, Kliavkoff put his foot in his mouth again. We still don't have any actual clarity on all this, layups and dominoes. But at the same time, the Pac-12 may be looking at it right now and saying, hey, look, all the anonymous quotes from inside the league right now are very confident. George Kliavkoff said publicly he is not worried about anybody leaving for the Big 12. So we're good. This is a layup. We're going to be okay. And that's kind of the situation we've been in for so long. It's just wild to me that we just can't budge off of the same basic position that we've been in for a very long time and all of this. And we're doing it with, once again, the timeline reset. I was literally just reading before I hopped on here one of the latest things from John Wilner. And at the end, it said like, hey, the clarity could finally come in these coming 6 weeks. And I was like, God, I mean, how many times have we read the same damn thing? Anyway, you guys understand. You know the deal on that. Okay, let's get rolling here. I would say that the most explosive quote from all of this, the thing that is generating probably the most discussion, was George Kliavkoff going through. He gives an opening statement. He has a Q&A. And I'm going to try and be as fair as I can with all of this. Let me go ahead and say, I saw some people taking shots at Kliavkoff for using a teleprompter for the opening statement. This is where I feel like there's plenty of criticism to go around with the Pac-12, how they've handled this, how this whole thing has gone. George Kliavkoff. And I'm going to get to some of that criticism in a moment. But let's make sure that we are being fair with all of this. That was one of the things I saw. I was like, that feels like a little bit of a low blow from everybody. And it's not particularly fair to come down on Kliavkoff for using a teleprompter. I mean, Brett Yormark did his walk and talk at Big 12 Media Days, like reading off of a sheet of paper the entire time. So I'm not going to crucify Kliavkoff for reading his opening statement off of a teleprompter. Not going to do that. Let's try to keep it as fair as possible. You know, I think it takes away, it makes an easy mark for those in Pac-12 country to go after things like that and not focus on legitimate criticism that's being levied here. But during the Q&A, and shout out to 365 Sports guys, they were the ones that had the audio that I listened to of all this, the Q&A. But Kliavkoff made it a point to say this. He said, quote, "We're not announcing a deal on purpose today because I want the focus to be on football." Which led to an obvious follow-up from a reporter. Does that mean the deal is done, right? If he's saying, hey, we're not announcing a deal on purpose today because I want the focus to be on football. The insinuation there, any reasonable person would insinuate from that you are saying a deal is done. So the follow-up question comes, does that mean a deal is done? And Kliavkoff says, quote, "I think you're reading too much into that." And then I will say, in listening to that exchange, the question then came from the reporter again right after that and was like, well, then what's the point of not announcing anything? And he was like, well, because we want the focus to be on football. And I was like, love the follow-up question. The whole line of questioning was great. In an ideal world, then I would have, the next follow-up question would be like, then how can you even say that? Like, that would be then I think the appropriate follow-up. Like, how can you even say that if you don't have a deal? You didn't have a deal to announce anyway. How can you come out here and say the reason that we're not announcing this is because we don't have a deal? You're lying. You're lying. You're just pulling stuff out here to try and make it sound good. I understand that, like, that's the Pac-12 had this problem, right, coming into it. They knew they weren't going to have a TV deal. They weren't even going to have Dion. There were the potential things there that could have helped smooth some things over, generate more positive publicity as opposed to just questions about this media rights deal that you knew would in large part overshadow the football discussion. You have that problem facing you. So you come in and you say, like, hey, we really would like the focus to be on what a great year in football this is actually going to be, which it is. No Big 12 homerism for me on that. It is going to be a really good year in the Pac-12 on the field on paper right now. It certainly appears that way. Got a lot of star power at quarterback and a lot of teams that could be playoff contenders. But you can't just make stuff up. You can't come in and say, hey, would have announced a TV deal here today, but we wanted the focus to be on football. And then you get pushed on it. You get actually pushed on it and be like, you're reading too much into that. And just press like, no, nobody is reading too much into that. Like that is the insinuation from what it is that you said. So I think, for the most part, Kliavkoff, he avoided some bait on Big 12 stuff. He didn't really go after the Big 12 too hard. There wasn't a ton of that going on. But man, you can't then mess up and say that. That's where I just continue to wonder. There are a couple things that really resonated with me on that front. One is I just continue to wonder why they can't get a PR person to help out a little bit more. Or is it that Kliavkoff just kind of goes rogue when he's actually out there talking? But it's been such a pattern that Kliavkoff, to his credit, he has been pretty much radio silent for most of this process. And he said, like, look, we figured out it wasn't affecting recruiting. We're recruiting really well. They had 6 teams, I believe, in the top 30 in this last class. They're recruiting well. It's not affecting their recruiting. So just, hey, lay low. I can understand that. And I think in a lot of ways, that's fairly sound. But if that's going to be your strategy, you got to be a little more calculated and careful when you come to a mic. And it just, every time that Kliavkoff has been at a mic, the few times that it has happened throughout this process, he always says something that draws negative headlines. And you wind up being like, what is that? It goes back to the Big 12 comment a year ago where he said, we haven't decided if we're going shopping there or not. The UCLA comments where he tried to legitimately make just an outlandish case that UCLA would actually be losing money or being about even monetarily by going to the Big Ten. And then there was the comment where he said they were going to catch up to the SEC and the Big Ten financially. Every time he has opened up his mouth, he has said something that draws negative headlines and people go like, what the hell is that? Like, what are you doing with that? And we got that once again, even though most of it was pretty good. You got one comment in there that everybody can really pick apart here and just be like, what are you doing, man? And the other thought that I have along with that, like congruent with that, is it's what drives me insane about the narratives surrounding the two commissioners from Pac-12 country. And this is mainly Canzano is the one that a couple times, like pretty early on in this process, really took some shots at Yormark, insinuating that he is like the greasy used car salesman sort of guy, not a very trustworthy figure. But the reality is George Kliavkoff is the one who's actually out here lying, misleading, saying misleading things behind a microphone. And he's also the one, now he really sidestepped the question. It was a great question that was asked at him. I forget who it was that asked it. Great question that was asked to him about like, hey, has there been a breakdown in communication between you and your presidents, you and your athletic directors? Because so many times they've come out and said, hey, we're going to get it on this timeline, and then that doesn't happen. He really did sidestep that question. So credit to him for that. But any reasonable person would look at that and say, hey, haven't you probably been leading them astray a little bit on this? The word out of this, the quote that kept getting thrown around was that Kliavkoff said deal was coming in the near future. Once again, we saw in the near future from Kliavkoff's mouth at Pac-12 Media Day. Well, in the very near future was the wording used in a statement from the conference, the unity statement back in February, the very near future in February. That was 5 months ago. And so now we're seeing that yet again here. Like, he is the one that has been using this language and misleading verbiage and words when he actually talks. Yormark is just open and aggressive. He's open and aggressive, but he's also been very effective in getting bleep done. And we just have not seen that with George Kliavkoff yet. So to me, it's like you look at these two guys, like I understand that Yormark's profile is like he's a very slick guy that is clearly very aggressive, all about marketing. And so I understand how you would look at that and your initial reaction is, oh, this guy must be like real wheeler dealer, kind of used car salesman sort of dude. But really, he's just confident enough to be very open about what his intentions are, and he gets things done. Whereas Kliavkoff comes across as much more like insecure, sloppy, and saying things that are very misleading or just outright lies, and now has started to get caught with some of those. So to me, it's like out of the two guys, like who do I trust more? I guess if the insinuation here is like, hey, Brett Yormark will steal your teams, yes, he absolutely would. But if the Pac-12 weren't too arrogant, they very much would have done the same thing if put in the same position. Unfortunately, they kind of passed on their opportunity because they felt like they were above taking schools out of the Big 12, right? So I just, in terms of who I trust their word more, like their public words more, I absolutely trust Brett Yormark's public words more. And he said as much. I will reference back to, I think it was the 365 Sports interview that Yormark did, but it was one of them from Media Day where he basically said, like, look, I'm just open. Like, I understand, I guess, how people could take that the wrong way or whatever, but my philosophy is I'm just going to be very open and transparent about what it is that I'm doing. And you do not get the same thing from Kliavkoff. So that really irks me about what the narrative is on Yormark coming out of Pac-12 country. Not that that really matters ultimately all that much, but just for those of us that are following this, the minutia of it on a day-to-day basis, that gets very, very annoying. And so we saw it yet again. I mean, to me, this was just very, very trademark Kliavkoff. And the Pac-12 is just like, I tweeted this, but they fancy themselves as a league of schools that are just on a different plane of intelligence than everybody else in the college sports world, especially those losers in the Big 12, right? Truck stop country, flyover country. Of course, we are more intelligent than anybody in the Big 12. Well, then how do you keep making the same PR mistakes over and over? Are we not churning out PR grads from Pac-12 institutions? Again, is it just George going too rogue and it's impossible to keep him completely on message and avoid making a statement like that is just going to make you look fairly silly? And so, again, you can have all the anonymous quotes that you want, saying we're fine, we're in a good spot. George Kliavkoff can come out and say, which he repeatedly did, that they're in a better spot because they have waited longer. I mean, okay, we can debate the validity of all that stuff. I understand how people could look at that from the Pac-12 side and say, hey, that does give me some confidence here. But I take a step back and say, I've just seen enough times where it's hard for me to trust what Kliavkoff is actually saying publicly, that gives me plenty of reason to doubt. And I'm still in the position, you guys know, for a long time, I was saying like, about a 30% chance I think someone would leave for the Big 12. And then when the Colorado smoke got crazy, I went to 50-50. Now I'm more back to like 30 to 40% chance. Like, I still think the more likely scenario is if the Pac-12 does find a way to stay together. But there's plenty of reason for that doubt to still exist and to still be there. That 60 or 70%, or rather 30 or 40%, is coming from the fact that, like, I can't trust this guy. I think it's foolish if you're going to say that you can legitimately trust the words that are coming out of his mouth, generally, because we've just seen too many times where he gets carried away, he can't help himself, and he comes off as being a guy that's pretty defensive. And is there a reason for that? I mean, he has certainly been like his league himself. He's been taking a lot of arrows from a lot of different places. I would say in a lot of cases, rightfully so. So yeah, I'm sure that would put you a little bit more on the defensive, but that's just a self-inflicted wound. That's an unforced error. That's a turnover. That's not Kliavkoff being like really pressured into a turnover. To me, that's like just coming across half court and kind of dribbling the ball off your foot and letting it go out of bounds. You throw a pass on the wing, you think someone's there, nobody is, you just threw it straight out of bounds. Like, that's an unforced error to me, as opposed to something that you were really kind of forced into because of your situation. That was unnecessary. It didn't need to happen for Mr. Kliavkoff. I see R Webb checking in. R Webb says, how can one compete with Lord Karen? You can't. That is right. You can't. All hail Lord Karen. All hail. Of course, you guys know my message today, all coming from my official talking point sheet from Lord Karen that was sent out along with my paycheck. So you are correct, R Webb. Any criticism here is clearly coming from that place. Matthew, what's up, Matthew? Matthew, appreciate you being here. Matthew Hunsacker. Matthew says, I'm not talking about my addition to the Chiefs roster on purpose so that we can focus on the John Kurtz show. All right, I'm not talking about my addition to the Chiefs roster on purpose so that we can focus on the John Kurtz show. What am I missing there, Matthew? Maybe I'm just I'm a little sleep deprived here today, so maybe I'm missing something there. You let me know what I'm missing on the Chiefs roster. But hey, I love that we're focusing on the show here. And obviously, if you guys are Chiefs haters, if you're not a Chiefs fan, I do apologize for the new background, and you have to look at the Mahomes Magic Crunch there every single day. But hey, I've held on to that cereal since like 2019. I think it's been like 4 years. Maybe it was even like 2018. I don't know, 4 or 5 years I've had that box of cereal. So done it long enough now. It's not going anywhere. It is not going anywhere. We're gonna make sure that that's on display. All right. If you guys want to join the party like Matthew, get your question or comment in on the show tonight, react along with the rest of us to George Kliavkoff's comments from Pac-12 Media Day, you can do so by clicking the $ below the chat where it says, below the chat box where it says chat. Click the $ below the chat box where it says chat to attach a donation to your question or comment. It will ensure that it gets read. Tack it up at the top of the chat for me so that it will ensure that I read it. You will help control the content, get your question or comment on the show, and support the work that I'm doing to bring you Big 12 content on a weekly basis. Much, much, much appreciate all of you guys who do that. I could not do it without all of your support. So that, again, was the real quote that drew a ton of attention from Kliavkoff. There was another one that I want to point out here. At least we're not really seeing the specific quote, but it led to a headline from Brandon Marcello in a conversation off to the side with Kliavkoff. So I know a lot of you are probably fairly familiar with this, but some who aren't. The way these generally work at Media Day is that the commissioner will go give, and this goes for typically coaches too, will go give their podium time, right? Where like it's televised, usually everybody is seeing it. Questions are being formally asked with a microphone from people sitting at tables in the audience, that is the media. But then when they get done, they will typically go off to the side and just do like a little, we call it like a gaggle of reporters coming around. And it's a little more, it's not as high profile, right? Because it's not being streamed. It's not being thrown out there live. And so usually that's where you're going to get better content. People will be a little bit more open and say things there. And you can ask more direct pointed questions sometimes when that is the case. So out of that, Brandon Marcello said this. He is with 24/7 Sports. He puts out a tweet and then an article that has this headline: Pac-12 commissioner, 10 remaining members will not leave conference. And so like, okay, that's a very strong statement that is being made there, and a little bit different than what he said on the podium. Now, he said the Big 12 was not a concern when it came to poaching teams. But this is a little bit stronger than that if you're going to say, hey, the 10 remaining members will not leave the conference. But then if you open up the article, we don't get an actual quote where it says that. It's just Marcello saying, hey, Kliavkoff said that they're not going to leave. The only quote that we really got out of that is I see, quote, I'm not going to tell you where our media deals are coming in. It will be enough for them to sign all their grant of rights. That's the important kind of milestone. So I'm not going to tell you where our media deals are coming in. It will be enough for them to sign their grant of rights. He's not going to give you the specific number. He'll just say that it's going to be enough. That was the only real quote from there. So I look at that and I say, let's go back to the theme here that I was talking about earlier, which is it's hard to trust what he says. And so if I'm getting that from Marcello and it's not even something that was significant enough to be like a longer quote, and we're just saying like, hey, Kliavkoff said nobody's leaving. I don't know, man. I mean, he just got challenged 2 days before that by the chancellor at Colorado, which is the one school right now that's in the crosshairs seemingly. I mean, I will say it feels like that the focus is really narrowed from Arizona and Colorado to just Colorado. But Colorado is the one that you've had to worry about. And Phil DiStefano, the chancellor, basically just publicly challenged you to provide more details. Reporting after the fact from Ross Dellinger said that there were not any sort of firm details provided on Thursday to the presidents and chancellors. So you didn't do that. And now you're going to come confidently say, hey, nobody's leaving. And then, oh, by the way, Rick George, Colorado's athletic director, this is another important piece of the proceedings on Friday in Vegas. He just bolted after his little podium session because he didn't want to do the side interview. He was saying that he had to go catch a flight, and that may well be true, but I don't know. Are you strategically scheduling that flight then so you can run off? That feels a little fishy, right? And that was Ross Dellinger. I'm going to read you his article. He kind of centered a lot of his article around that very fact. Like, hey, we have all this noise surrounding Colorado, and then the Colorado AD is going to just run off and be screaming to people like, hey, I got a flight to catch. Sorry, peace out. At the end of it, I mean, that would make me feel a little bit nervous if I were a Pac-12 fan. So anyway, it's just hard to know how much to trust George Kliavkoff when he is coming out and saying all of that. Colorado's position has long been, we're going to wait and see what the deal is and then make a decision. You have not put a deal yet in front of them, and yet you're sitting here saying confidently nobody is going to leave. Just hard to take some of those comments at face value. But again, if you are in Pac-12 country, I'm sure you do, and you say, hey, there we go, we're good. Kliavkoff says nobody's leaving. That's fine, and we're back in this same feedback loop that we've been in for a very long time. One interesting nugget I will say, I'll point this out from Brandon Marcello's story. This was a blurb. It said, other TV partners have reportedly entered the fold in recent weeks as discussions for the Pac-12's media rights stretches into an 11th month. Fox is among them, according to sources. You know, we've heard for a while from like the John Orans of the world, Andrew Marchand's. that it didn't seem like Fox would be a possibility. The one thing, though, that's been the caveat with that is always like, well, hey, Fox or ESPN at the right price, yeah, sure, they might get back in. So I kind of think like, all right, you're going to say here, the longer this goes, the better it is. More suitors coming to the table. I do feel like there's something to maybe it's more suitors coming to the table just because this is something where they feel like they can get in at more of a discount now. Like they don't have to worry about paying full price. And if you're not worried about paying full price, then all of a sudden that changes the equation a little bit. So that again is where like, hey, Kliavkoff can say, this is great. We're getting more suitors at the table, but it could also be more suitors at the table because the price is coming down. They realize some of the desperation that's going on here, the situation that they're in. And maybe some of that comes from them feeling like they need to get more visibility involved here, more linear partners. Again, just a lot of speculation. Nobody really knows. Another bit that we got, a nugget that we got out of all this is that George Kliavkoff supposedly only allows one single person to be in the room with him when he is having these conversations with TV networks. There's only one other person. So it underscores, again, people that try to give like inside information. There is supposedly one person with George Kliavkoff in these that would like theoretically know exactly what is really going on there and what the conversations are. So it is just almost impossible to know, but I've given you, I feel like, plenty through the first 25 minutes of this video, plenty of reasons to take some of what George Kliavkoff says with a grain of salt. R-Web. What's up, R-Web? R-Web says, B Izzo outdoing Rucker while Georgie out jiving pack suckers. Pretty good. But R-Web's got bars. You know he's got bars, rather. And that, of course, is a reference to the fact that the Big 12 had their Rucker Park event on Friday, which was very cool. Jerome Tang was there. Naquan Tomlin was there. Mr. New York City, Marquise Noel was there, which was very cool to see. It's kind of cool for me, too, because when I traveled to go watch K-State in the Elite Eight game against Florida Atlantic the next day, when I just had an extra day to kick it around NYC, I went and hung out at Rucker Park for a little while. So I was like, oh, hey, like I recognize that now. Can say that I've been there. Very cool event. You're right. B Izzo outdoing Rucker while Georgie out jiving Pac-12 suckers. Sometime R-Web, if you could like get a YouTube video up, like a whole song, give me like a whole song on the Pac-12 situation. And then maybe we can get Jay-Z to do a version of it. We can get Jay-Z to actually do that because Brett Yormark has those connections, right? Rock Nation. If we can put something together, maybe we can get Jay-Z actually on that. Maybe it would be just a better version of the, remember the basketball like anthem that they had at the basketball tournament, the Big 12 song, it got panned a little bit. People were making fun of it. Just get Jay-Z on that, man. Get actual Hova to come in and make the Big 12 a song. I'm all the way here for that. The Yates 27. What's up, the Yates 27? Thank you for your support. Thank you for being here. The Yates 27 says, George Kliavkoff reminded me of the Rick James Chappelle skit. He's like, I'd never grind my feet in someone's couch. Sure, I remember grinding my feet in Eddie's couch. Yeah, being a little contradictory. Yeah, a little contradictory, I would say. Also, I think there is a bit of contradiction in like, hey, the longer this goes on, actually, the better it gets for us. When the whole time, the messages from both the conference and conference leaders has been, oh, we're getting it soon. We know we need to get it soon. We're getting it soon. We know we're needing to get it soon. I don't know. It's a little contradictory to what your message that you've been preaching this whole time is. If you're saying that this whole process that has clearly been very arduous and stressful, and you've been trying to end faster and trying to get out the message that you're going to end it faster, and now all of a sudden you're pivoting and saying, hey, it's all better. I don't know. The Pac-12 is clearly trying to push the message right now that all these layoffs have happened. Things have gone down in the streaming world and with ESPN, Apple, Amazon, everybody's been going through some troubles. Now we're coming back out of it. Everything's great. We're coming back out of it. This is going to be good. To me, it feels like an awfully fast declaration of that. But once again, I don't know. I'm not in boardrooms with TV executives. I don't know exactly how all that's going down. But that is certainly the message that they are trying to preach. And also, hey, the Yates 27, I will never knock Chappelle's show references. Gotta love Chappelle's show. Connor, what's up, Connor? Connor, appreciate you being here as always. Connor Cole checking in says, does anyone think the issue people have with the Pac is the arrogance from the schools? And that's actually why we want them to fail. And if they weren't so arrogant, people would have sympathy for them. Yes, that is definitely a huge part of it. I think, Connor, you hit on a large part of the issue there. Let me start by saying this. One thing that I heard George Kliavkoff say that I will give him some credit for is he was asked about like working with Brett Yormark and what that relationship is like. And he kind of said like, look, at a certain point, we're going to get this media deal done. We'll put all this in the past, and we have bigger fish to fry. We have big issues to worry about in college athletics, and we're going to work together and get it all figured out and move forward and be fine. And that actually was a pretty good, like, high road sort of response. And I think hopefully there's a time when that happens with everybody. I don't intend to be like, I would not, 3 years from now, I don't want to be sitting here like hand wringing over every single detail of everything that happens with the Pac 12 and having to fight all the time and all that. But the issue is twofold. I think one, yes, the arrogance is a part of it. The arrogance and this, it's all the arrogance that revolves around like a superiority complex out there based around academics in large part is where a lot of that starts. And just looking down at the Big 12, it goes back to when Texas and Oklahoma left, and the Pac 12 basically just kind of thumbed their nose at the rest of the Big 12 at that point. And not only that, but many of these same media sources, Stuart Mandel being one of the big ones that people point to, that are now very cozy with the Pac 12, were very much not that way with the Big 12 when Texas and Oklahoma left. And we're not singing the praises there. And there was a lot of grave dancing going on. So it's the combination of the Pac 12 being a part of that. And having all of that arrogance and stuff that has always accompanied that, looking down at the Big 12 schools, along with the fact that the Big 12 for so long just was being stepped on by everybody. Nobody cared when the Big 12 was on life support. Nobody cared. You had nobody running to the Big 12's defense except for those of us that are here and those of us that were fans of teams in the conference. Nobody was running to the Big 12's aid. We saw more of that for the Pac 12 from some of these national writers. And so you just have this natural tension where it's like, look, screw you guys. Like, you were here for the death of the Big 12. Now there's a little bit of competition here because the death of the Pac 12 could actually benefit the Big 12. So of course we're going to go all in on this. You guys never had nice things to say about us before. Now finally it's somebody else on the line, and there are more people running to your defense than there were running to our defense. Yeah, of course it's going to become pretty adversarial. So that's how all that developed. And yes, it is a piece of it. As far as, and I guess I'm only speaking there, Connor, if you're speaking maybe to the like broader college football fan at large, the bigger picture, maybe it's a little bit different. I think in this case, I'm talking about like Big 12 fans and how it's turned into this Big 12 v Pac 12 thing. That is a factor, but it's a little bit more complicated with the Big 12. I think like nationally, if you're talking about nationally, there's not enough sympathy for the Pac 12 from folks. I think that's just more like due to like kind of how we are as a culture today. Twitter is always going to be negative. Twitter is always going to lean into like the jokes and wanting to make fun of whoever's in the position of turmoil and strife and all that. And that's been the Pac-12 here lately. It becomes an easy target, and I think people just jump in on it wanting to make jokes. So that's really why you have that. Tay, what's up, Tay? Appreciate you. Tay Kim, nice donation. Thank you. Thank you for your support. Tay says, what do you think Kliavkoff meant when he said, what we've seen is every time we wait, we get more opportunities and better numbers? Yeah, I mean, you're addressing there the comments that have been referenced already here before, which is George Kliavkoff and sources coming from the Pac-12. This was like right in lockstep with what we saw sources telling people in Pac-12 country right before this. That, hey, it's actually gotten better. The longer that we've waited, the more patient we are, the more suitors come to the table and the better a deal is going to get. I don't know specifically what that is. It just depends on who you believe, you know, and what rumor you want to believe out there as far as what that actually is. I said just a second ago, Brandon Marcello reported that Fox is now back at the table, so that could be a part of it. If Fox has decided to come back and get into the game, I would submit the same thing once again that I said a minute ago, which is that it could very well be that more parties get involved once they realize that they could come in at a discount and they could get some of this inventory for cheaper than what they had originally anticipated. But it could also be the Pac-12 would tell you, here's the other alternate explanation, Tay, again, just mentioned, but I'll reiterate it. The Pac-12 would tell you it's about all of these companies had to go through layoffs, go through turmoil, go through like just the money spigot being turned off a little bit, or at least curtailed some. They've made it through some hard times, and now that has settled a little bit, and so they're in a better place. Now that they're in a better place, they're a little bit distanced from some of the layoffs. They can come back around to the table and be a little bit more involved here and start to pick themselves back up on their feet. That would be the explanation that the Pac-12 would give you. So you can kind of choose which one of those you think is most plausible. I will just give you, I think, what the potential explanations are there. You can pick which one you want to believe, because nobody outside of the one person that is in that room along with George Kliavkoff really knows exactly what is going on there. So that's what I would say, Tay. It's a good question, and unfortunately, nobody really has the full answer. Nobody really has the full answer on what exactly is going on. Julius, what's up, Julius? Appreciate you. Thank you so much, Julius. As always, incredibly supportive here of the channel. Thank you. I appreciate it so much. And Julius, always very kind. Julius says, "Howdy, John. I just want to show some support. It's a little over a month till kickoff, and I want to wish the best of luck to everybody in the new Big 12 in the upcoming season." Thank you, Julius. I love the good vibes. That's one thing I know you can count on with Julius. Going to bring good vibes to everybody in here. And that is always very immensely appreciated here on this channel where, we're talking about something that gets contentious on both sides, Big 12, Pac-12. It's always great to have somebody just coming in for the good vibes. Julius, you play an important role here. So thank you for all of your support as always. And yes, good luck to everybody. Good luck to everybody in the new Big 12 this year in the upcoming season. What did you say? Just a little over a month till kickoff. I think, are we inside 5 weeks until week 0? I think we are, maybe it's 6 weeks. Maybe we're just inside 6 weeks to week 0. I can't remember. I thought I saw it was like 7 to week 1 of the NFL. And I think week 0 is 2 weeks before that. I don't know. I don't want to get anybody's hopes up too much. Either way, we still got a little ways to go, but we're inching closer. We're inching closer, people. All right, Matthew. Matthew is back. Matthew, I'm sorry that I did not get the last joke. Matthew, thank you for your support and thank you for chipping in again. To be a part of the conversation. Matthew says, my last joke didn't hit, but there are a lot of things we can hint that may or may not be true, but we'll let the listener think we have something important to say, but choose to discuss things. Well, yes, I am. My apologies that I didn't get the Chiefs roster joke there, Matthew. But I mean, is this in reference to there are a lot of things we can hint that may or may not be true, but we'll let the listener think we have something important to say, but choose to discuss things. I mean, I feel like that's kind of like the whole Pac-12 Kliavkoff game. I almost started to call it a grift there, but I won't fully go down that road. But that's kind of the game right now is, hey, we'll float some of these things. Can't give you details, but we'll give you big picture ideas that everything's fine. Can't tell you exactly why. You've got to determine and decipher what exactly you believe, what you think the reasoning is behind that, and how much you should actually believe me. And we know where the party lines where that really splits down right now in terms of who believes what coming actually out of George Kliavkoff's mouth. I think that's pretty much where we're at right now as far as this goes, and just a broken record. I mean, it is definitely a broken record that we are still here. Eddie Lozano, San Antonio Real Estate. Thank you for being here, Eddie. Much appreciated as always. Eddie Lozano, San Antonio Real Estate says, Oregon and Washington have served divorce papers to the Pac-12. Why are the other Pac-12 schools committed if Oregon and Washington have one foot out the door? Well, Oregon and I would first say that I think there are people that would fight you on Oregon and Washington 1 foot out the door right now, but it's not because of their want. It's because of the receptiveness of the Big Ten, who's going through a change in commissioner, where it seemed like clearly the last commissioner, Kevin Warren, was the command and conquer sort of guy that probably would have had more interest in going all the way in to do that with Oregon and Washington, and the appetite probably isn't there from the rest of the conference. And so at a certain point, then it's kind of just like, all right, well, the options are get to a similar-ish sort of football conference for probably a little bit more money, a little bit more exposure, but have to move everything, have to take on the expenses of sending our Olympic sports to Morgantown, West Virginia, to UCF, right, Orlando, like take on extra travel expenses, all these things that would be difficult, and leave tradition, rivalries, all the things that we have in this conference. Like, I think that's really it, that they're looking at it saying, well, hey, if Oregon and Washington, which supposedly they've all agreed on a grant of rights that they would sign it, if Oregon and Washington have agreed to this and we can't actually get a deal where they're going to sign away their rights for 5 to 7 years, that does provide us a level of stability. Now, there has also been speculation about, clauses in there. Would there be an out for Oregon and Washington to leave early for the Big Ten? I guess potentially there could be. But I think a lot of it is about just trying to take what you can for a while now, ride this thing out with your compadres, your rivals, the people you've been in a league with for a while, not have to deal with the pain of moving as long as you can right now, if the numbers and all of that at least come close. You do it now until the ship sinks, and then, hey, if you are like Colorado, do you think the Big 12 like wouldn't be there, 2-3 years from now, if like Oregon and Washington leave in 2 years? Would the door totally be shut on the Big 12 at that point in time? I would certainly have my doubts about that, because again, I think the long-term play for the Big 12 here is to just be the best of the rest conference, try to be the third best conference. I think that would still give those four corner schools potentially a landing spot then, if and when that were to happen. And, I will say this, because I was reading some of the discourse on this over the weekend and was thinking like, I just saw someone pushing like, hey, one of the things we've learned in all this, because it's been a freaking year now that these Pac-12 schools have had the opportunity to leave and haven't, with repeated broken promises from Kliavkoff, repeated missteps by Kliavkoff and the leadership. We clearly know they don't really want to join the Big 12. I mean, like, I would actually kind of agree with that. Like, I think it's been made pretty clear. These schools they don't want to leave the Pac-12 for the Big 12. Back to whoever it was that asked me about arrogance. I apologize. I'm bad with remembering the names here. But somebody asked me earlier about the arrogance of the Pac-12. Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of that. They don't want to leave that for Big 12 country, for these schools in flyover country, even if it is like a Colorado. I mean, look, Colorado, they left that league once because they fancied themselves belonging with the Berkeley and Palo Alto schools of the world and hanging out there, and their alums that are out in California. They left for that once already. Like, they very much value that. So I think they truly don't want to leave unless they're absolutely forced to because of the situation that they're in, but they're getting close. Like, Colorado at least is teetering on that point. So I think that's a fairly complex answer to your question, but I think that is probably you probably need to make it fairly complex to hit all those different aspects of it to get to what is actually going on there. So I hope that helps. But if you need a real estate agent in San Antonio, Eddie Lozano, San Antonio Real Estate, go hit him up. Zach, what's up, Zach? Appreciate you being here, Zach. Thank you so much as always, my friend. Zach says, saw that your beloved K-State is coming to Cincy for a Big 12 conference basketball game. Will you be making the pilgrimage to the Queen City, Mr. Kurtz? I don't know yet. That would probably have to be like see what is going on with work around the time that game is taking place. But I would consider it. I would definitely consider it. Yeah, I'll have to look into that. Like, maybe I can, I don't know, I'll have to talk to my guy DY, who runs the K-State On 3 site. Maybe I can jump in on a little trip with those guys or something and cut some costs and make it happen. I would love to if I can. Stay tuned on that one, Zach. Remind me as we get closer to that. I would love to do it. But Zach, our resident Cincinnati fan here in the chat, it is great to hear from you. Great to see you. Again, please accept my apologies for the fact that timing didn't work out to get you a lot of coverage from Big 12 Media Day about Cincinnati. But always appreciate you, man. Always appreciate your support. And I would love to go grab some Skyline Chili and watch K-State and Cincinnati in hoops this year. McKay, what's up, McKay? McKay Boyle here. Thank you for your support, and I much appreciate this question. McKay says, love your channel. What's your prediction for BYU this season, plus or minus 6 wins? I think 6 wins is a pretty good over-under number to put it at, because then if I'm like forced to go over and say, like, I think my prediction would be 6 or 7 for BYU. 6 or 7, and I would lean more toward the 6 on that. So, like, again, if the over-under is set dead at 6, I'm probably going to go push there. If you made it 6.5, I would probably go under. And if you made it 5.5, I would go over, which I think that's what we've seen in Vegas. Some is like a 5.5 as the number there for BYU. I think I would go over on that. I would like BYU to win 6 or 7 games. I do think I still need to see a little bit. I have some doubts, based on what happened last year as to how BYU can hold up over the course of a Big 12 season this year. But I also think that the infrastructure in that program is very solid, and I do really like Kalani Sitake as a head coach. So I think they're not going to free fall or anything like that. I would expect BYU to be a bowl team. We'll put it that way. And I think that would be a nice accomplishment for year one of the Big 12 to just get your footing in the new league, and then start building beyond that. Like, I've got no doubt BYU is going to be able to consistently compete in the Big 12. That's not my concern. Matthew, what's up, Matthew? Matthew checking in again. Appreciate you, Matthew. Matthew says, if no Pac-12 media deal announced by September 1st, what odds do you give that George Kliavkoff as commissioner after week 1 football is wrapped up? That's a question that will start, I think, to probably come into the picture if they don't actually have a deal by the time football season starts. I would be interested to know about that. That was even brought up. Let me see if I have this. Like, John Wilner Now, this was before, it was on the front end of media day. But on the front end of media day, yeah, here we go. He was answering a question in his mailbag that said, any change in the Pac 12 survival point spread? So let me read you the beginning of this. He said, not yet. The hotline currently views Pac 12 survival as a 4-point favorite over Pac 12 extinction, but I'm evaluating a series of developments and reassessing the line. Certainly, the lack of a deal in time for the preseason media showcase will be considered, as will the manner in which George Kliavkoff handles the issue during his Q&A with reporters. The situation in Las Vegas will have no bearing on the terms of the contract, the media, okay, blah, blah, blah. But he says, but in our view, there is a psychological component to the proceedings, with Kliavkoff's performance potentially impacting the confidence level various campuses have in his leadership. So this is before media day. John Wilner, who's been obviously very, very much painting a more rosy picture of everything for the Pac-12's sake throughout a lot of this, he says, in our view, there is a psychological component to the proceedings, with Kliavkoff's performance potentially impacting the confidence level various campuses have in his leadership. So he's saying, like, look, man, we're getting to the point now where the leadership can start to come into question here with campuses across the league. Says he is, after all, leading a process that has lasted far longer than presidents expected. And again, I will direct you back to Colorado, biggest flight risk, and their chancellor just came out 2 days before media day, basically, we now know, putting public pressure on him to produce actual tangible numbers, which did not happen. According to Ross Dellinger's reporting, did not happen. So I think it's a worthy question to ask. Now, do I think they would do anything as hasty as he would be gone by week 1? No, I don't. I think he would still be there. I think the odds would still be very, very high that he is there. But if it's like dragging into football season, I would just say, I suppose all bets are off at that point, because it's just going to be so far removed from what we thought was any sort of reasonable timeline and expectation for this to actually happen. And again, I will remind you, John Wilner, I respect. I don't do this lightly to bring up an old quote here, but this was a pretty definitive statement from Wilner just over a month ago. On June 20th, he wrote this. It was a question asked to him. If a media rights deal isn't completed by football media day, will Commissioner George Kliavkoff still speak there, or will he avoid speaking to reporters? And Wilner's lead response here was, our absolute drop dead must be completed and announced deadline for the Pac-12's media rights contract is Friday, July 21st. Let me read that to you again. Our absolute drop dead must be completed and announced deadline for the Pac-12's media rights contract is Friday, July 21st. That was written on June 20th by John Wilner. And then he gets asked in the mailbag right around Pac-12 Media Days, hey, has the point spread changed? And he gives a pretty, a response where he says he's going to take everything into account. But a part of what he's going to take into account is that the streaming market is getting actually better. So that could help out the Pac-12, and he hopes to have an updated point spread next week. So, it's just a goalpost moving again. Like, that's the guy, I respect his journalism chops, but we've seen this time and time again, and there's never really much admission of this when it happens. But that was a drop dead, surefire, has to be done deadline, July 21st, and now we're here, and it's just, I don't think the survival odds are really going to change, and if they do, they might actually be better now. So it's just the whole ecosystem on the Pac-12 side. It's hard to take a lot of what they say seriously, especially if it concerns any kind of a deadline. If it concerns any kind of a deadline, it is very difficult to take seriously. Robert, what's up, Robert? Robert, appreciate you being here. Robert references something I said earlier, which was I didn't really love criticism that I saw for George Kliavkoff reading off of a teleprompter. I think there are much more legitimate things to get after him about than that. But Robert says teleprompter criticism is valid. The art of communication is the language of leadership. James Hunter, former presidential speechwriter. Kliavkoff sucks at it. Well, I won't agree with that part. Let me put it to you this way, Robert. I think big picture, your criticism there and your comment is fairly valid. I don't think he is the greatest at this, based on, just the fact that we've seen his presidents and ADs wind up with egg on their face, because it doesn't seem like communication's been good from him to them. He has said lots of things that come across sounding poorly in media interviews before. Lots of reasons to believe he's not a great communicator here. But if you're just taking like a one instance of this and just saying, hey, the proof of that is because he had to read off of a teleprompter or that thing, to me, that's not enough. When you pair it with everything else and you want to say, hey, he really does have a problem, he's not a great communicator, I wouldn't deny that. I'm with you on that. So I guess like it would make sense if, that's the way he's going to have to do it. But I don't think that in and of itself is really the big problem and the reason. And again, Brett Yormark, some people were taking shots at him for reading straight off of a piece of paper and walking around and doing his thing at Big 12 Media Days. And I just think that's kind of a glass houses thing if you're going to attack that specific point. So I would not. I'm still not a huge fan of it, but you have a point in terms of the overall communication problems that exist there. That is very, very, very obvious that they exist there for Kliavkoff overall. Aglist, what's up, Aglist? Appreciate you being here as always. Aglist says, thanks, John. Great show tonight. We'd all be excited to see Colorado and Arizona join the Big 12. But in your opinion, when does the Big 12 get too big? 122 days until the Sunflower Showdown. Rock Chalk Jayhawk Allen. Thank you for keeping track as always, Alan. Hope you got to watch your KU guys in the TBT tournament that was going on. I only saw like just a teeny bit of K-State. They went 2 and done, unfortunately there. But okay, when does the Big 12 get too big? It's funny you say that because Dan Wetzel, those of you that watched that interview from the channel earlier this week, and I really appreciate him coming on. I freaking love the podcast that he does with Ross Dellinger and Pat Forty, the College Football Inquirer from Yahoo Sports. That was a thrill for me to get to talk to him. But he kind of made that point, and it was in reference to UConn, where he thought just becoming too big, losing an identity, which I think that point is very much up for debate. And boy, there has been some debate in the comments on that. I think that's the most commented video I've had in a long time. Like the comments were outweighing the likes there. So people definitely had some takes and some opinions on what it was that Dan Wetzel had to say in that interview. I think too big, to me, I say too big is when if you're adding group of 5 teams. For me right now, if you're still at a point where you're adding pro rata, so the pro rata clause kicks in where you're getting the extra money, the extra share from the TV network for adding these schools, as long as you're still doing that, I don't really think there is much of a too big right now, because the goal is to be the third conference, the best of the rest conference. And eventually it feels like the SEC and Big Ten will get up to like pushing 20 teams in their conference. That's going to leave, I think, a pretty big wide net for a third league to be there with a bunch of teams. I think that could still very well be you without being quote unquote too big. Now, if you want to talk about like identity and branding, like sure, that could get a little weird, but realignment's not about that. You kind of just take them in, figure it out later. And you're trying to survive and take in as many Power 5 schools as you can right now. I don't really have too much of an issue with any P5 schools. UConn, it is very debatable. That is one you guys know, like I've waffled on. It's an extremely debatable example. But anybody else, if it's teams from the ACC, teams from the Pac-12, whatever, Colorado and Arizona there, like I would not poo-poo any of that. I would not think that that's making the Big 12 too big. I think you're getting too big when, like Memphis talk, right? And San Diego State, even though I feel horrible for San Diego State now that it looks like the expansion momentum has certainly been quelled a little bit in the Pac-12. But if you're talking about schools like that now, I think you can really have a conversation of, all right, is that extending a little bit too far for the Big 12? So it's not so much about like sheer numbers. It's about quality of those numbers. Who are you actually adding? Quality versus quantity thing for me. Matthew, what's up, Matthew? Matthew checking in again. Appreciate all the support tonight, Matthew. Matthew says, gotta run. We'll listen to the rest later. Hope you get to 17K subscribers soon and maybe 20K by football season. Your coverage of the Big 12 is top notch. Well, thank you, Matthew. I very much appreciate that. You get in this sphere, this space, you're going to get a lot of negative comments. It's always great to hear positive things. People generally are going to tell you negative things before they are positive. So that is very kind. Would love to get to 17,000 subscribers. And hey, if you guys keep telling your friends, word of mouth, push this around social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it might be, tell your friends about this channel, and let's continue getting those subs up. Appreciate it, Matthew. And hey, if you guys can all like the video right now, I would appreciate that as well as we enter the last 5 to 10 minutes here of the video. Like the video, totally free. Give me one click. That is a free way to support the channel. Leave a comment in the comments section under the video before, during, or after. That also helps me with that YouTube algorithm. I would appreciate any of that support, and that is one way that we can get those numbers up a little bit. Also, if you do in the last 5 to 10 minutes, you want a little bit of a buzzer beater here, you can get your donations in. Click the $ below the chat box where it says chat, and you can attach a donation to your question or comment and support the channel here while making your voice heard. Rob, what's up, Rob? Rob says, here late, can't wait for the season. Who is the most underrated running back in the Big 12, and why is it DJ Giddens? Very well may be because he's being a little underrated within the context of his own team, because Trayshawn Ward, who I love and I'm very excited about, transfer from Florida State to K-State. He was the Big 12 newcomer of the year preseason. So that already is making DJ Giddens a little bit overshadowed. DJ Giddens is a quieter personality on the team too. So he's not a guy that's going to be like out tooting his own horn a bunch. I think that probably like supplements this storyline here of a guy that could be very, very underrated. But I don't know. I think there are a lot of options for that. Like, I think Donaldson at West Virginia could probably qualify as that, especially since they got picked last in the Big 12. Like, I think he's a total stud. I think Devin Neal at Kansas could probably qualify as that. He's a little overshadowed on his own offense by Jalen Daniels, when Devin Neal is just a phenomenal running back. Those are a couple of guys that come to my mind that I would throw in along with DJ Giddens there. But you can very well make a case for DJ Giddens. You can very, very well make a case there. McMuffin, thank you for being here. Always appreciate your support, McMuffin. And McMuffin giving the standard fare here, just John Kurtz. McMuffin just wants me to read my own name. It sounds great. I love hearing my own name, John Kurtz. Very sleek name, if you ask me. So thank you, McMuffin. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting the channel, as always. I am realizing here I did not read you the different tones that we got from the articles from Stuart Mandel and Ross Dellinger out of Pac-12 Media Day. I actually think that works here as a nice close to the session and the show tonight to show you just how differently this was perceived. The proceedings were perceived by two different writers here. Now, Mandel, we know, as always, he's had a little bit of a soft spot for the Pac-12, has carried some water for the Pac-12 at points here. He says the Pac-12 made a concerted effort at Friday's Football Media Day to spotlight his upcoming season. It opened the festivities at Zook nightclub with a flashy video montage highlighting its bevy of star quarterbacks. Then Commissioner Kliavkoff took the stage and, not surprisingly, fielded 0 questions about football and 7 about this year-long drama surrounding the league's media rights deal. At one point, he said, quote, "We're not announcing a deal on purpose today because I want the focus to be on football," which led to an obvious follow-up from a reporter. "Does that mean the deal is done?" Quote, "I think you're reading too much into that," replied Kliavkoff. The commissioner's address Friday marked his first on-the-record comments on topics since December. At this point, after a year's worth of presidents predicting a deal in the next couple of weeks or by the end of the month, there's nothing he could have said that wouldn't be met with rolled eyes. But, and here's where we start to get the divergence. Mandel says, but in conversations with several ADs and league officials over the course of the day Friday, folks seemed a lot more relaxed than they did this time a year ago. Quote, "The 10 schools are together, and in recent weeks, there's been substantive progress on the media rights deal," said Oregon AD Rob Mullins. Like everybody, I'm excited to get it across the finish line. Echoing a report by The Athletic earlier this week, Mullins referenced additional players at the table that recently emerged. Asked whether any concern remains about one or more of the 4 corner schools leaving for the Big 12, Mullins said, "I'm not losing any sleep over that. It's been virtually impossible over the past year to glean any credible details about which media companies the Pac-12 is or isn't talking to, much less for how much money they might get. Kliavkoff has kept his circle tight. A league official told me only one other person is in the room with him for meetings, but Kliavkoff has done nothing to change the Pac-12's dying narrative by hiding in his bunker for the past 7 months." No one has yet identified these mysterious new bidders that purportedly entered or re-entered the picture sometime in the past month, but the league official outlined several factors why the market may have changed in the conference's favor. Quote, "Think about what the media and technology companies have been going through the last 9 months. Economic downturn, soft ad market, worse stock performance for most of these guys in decades, layoffs, writers, and now actor strikes. It's been a brutal economic time. We're just starting to come out of that. What we've seen is every time we wait, we get more opportunities and better numbers." All right, so even that, even Mandel, it's not completely glowingly positive, but he certainly gives a little bit more credence to the Pac-12's narrative that they're pushing right now about the landscape changing in the media rights sphere, things being better the longer that they actually wait. And he's saying, hey, people seem very, very confident behind the scenes. Now, let's contrast that with Ross Dellinger, formerly of Sports Illustrated, now with Yahoo Sports. His lead is this. Colorado Athletic Director Rick George swiftly left the main stage at Pac-12 Football Media Day on Friday, only to be met by a handful of inquisitive reporters. For months now, Colorado's future as a member of the Pac-12 has been in doubt. George and his chancellor, Phil DiStefano, have left open the possibility that the school could pursue other league suitors, such as the Big 12, if the Pac-12's TV deal isn't satisfactory. Naturally, at Media Day, reporters were interested in learning more. Quote, "I've got a flight to catch," George bellowed. It's true. George had a flight to catch, and he was already running behind in jeopardy of missing his jet. We've all been there, rushing to the airport in a panicked hurry. However, this scene encapsulated the Pac-12's hairy situation. One of its most respected administrators escaping from a pack of reporters into the desert heat. For 8 hours here at their annual celebration of the upcoming season, Commissioner Kliavkoff and co. attempted to shift the focus on actual football. So what you basically have here are two different, like the basis of what was being said in the first article there from the more Pac-12 friendly guy and Stuart Mandel is like, look, everybody here is confident. Pac-12 officials seem very confident. That was the focus of a lot of his article. Whereas Ross Dellinger makes the point of Rick George, the AD at the school that is the one school that everybody's really concerned about leaving, that thinks there is a legitimate chance that they leave. He's saying this guy just bolted. This guy bolted and was blaming a flight to catch as being the reason that he's not sticking around to answer a bunch of questions 2 days after his chancellor put public pressure on the commissioner to provide actual numbers, which were not provided. That's a problem. And this is kind of the situation the Pac-12 is in. Two very different ways to frame up what exactly took place on Friday. And that just perfectly accentuates the point that has been made from the start of this entire episode and this entire show, which is you can read into this about whatever you want because we didn't get any actual clarity on what the hell is going on and what this deal is going to wind up being for the Pac-12. So I feel like it puts a pretty nice bow on everything here. Eddie Lozano beating the buzzer. Eddie Lozano, San Antonio Real Estate. Again, if you're in San Antonio, you need a real estate agent. You know who it is. Eddie Lozano. Eddie says, thank you for your endorsement. Of course, my friend. One last thing. Pac-12 loves to tell us how much they make on academics and research. Then why are some of the Pac-12 schools operating in the red? Yeah, money has been a problem in Pac-12 country for a number of these schools. And even we're just talking about like the athletic side of things, like Washington State and Washington. It was not that long ago that they both had to go through the bad news cycle and just the reality of the position that they're in financially, where they're both hurting. Even Washington, there was a good article in the Seattle newspaper about everything going on at Washington, in spite of the fact that they had great season ticket sales numbers last year, and they're going to be great again this year because they're going to have a really good team. And Washington State has even had, they've been on the upswing with their football program here lately, and they're dealing with a lot of financial issues. So yes, the Pac-12 schools are having some financial troubles in general. And then obviously that trickles over into their league TV contract, which is why it's imperative. I mean, that's a part of why the stakes do feel pretty high here for the Pac-12, because athletic departments like Washington and Washington State, they need that TV deal to be pretty good. They do definitely need some good money to come in there. So it's a fair point. It's a fair point to make, Eddie. Appreciate you being here and appreciate all of your support tonight, as always. Okay. I see someone pointing out UCLA's in the red. Yeah, UCLA's been in a lot of trouble financially lately with their athletic department, thus moving to the Big Ten. Appreciate all of you guys being here. Good show tonight. A lot to react to, obviously, with Kliavkoff's press conference. You know where to stay tuned to all the latest developments. Keep them coming here on this channel. Spread the word of mouth. Tell your friends and family who love the Big 12, love conference realignment, love college football about this channel. Spread the word on social media. Twitter, I guess, is going to change to X tomorrow, whatever you want to call that app. Just keep spreading the word there. Facebook, Instagram, whatever. Groups for your team, for the conference, whatever it may be, get those posted there. Make sure people know about this and continue to subscribe and get those numbers up here on the channel. I appreciate you all. Just want to continue making this community bigger and better for everybody here. John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo if you'd like to support the channel that way. If you can like the video on the way out the door, that would also be great. And leave a comment in the comment section as soon as we are done here, whether you love me, hate me, agree, disagree, all of that helps. Great way to support the channel as well. Take care, you guys. Appreciate all of you. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday night, and I will talk to you soon.